Welcome to Vitality Made Simple, the podcast that empowers you to feel better, look better, and to more fully enjoy all the relationships in your life. You know, life comes down to relationships, to nurturing those people that God has put in our pathway. And today we have someone that is a relationship expert. I've known of her for over 20 years. And welcome, Dr. Carolyn Dean.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and share a brain. Thank you.
It's all my pleasure. Dr. Dean is the world expert in magnesium. Magnesium is a critical mineral for hundreds and hundreds of biochemical reactions. Most of us are deficient, and Dr. Dean has the unique qualifications to tell us about all of this because she is a medical doctor as well as a naturopath, and she's been doing this for over 50 years. When you see her, if you're watching on video, you're going to be astounded at how much vitality she has. She's gorgeous. And we talk about vitality here, you know, being zest for life and continued purpose and, you know, a really strong brain, a really strong body. And you really epitomize that. Carolyn, just thank you so much. I just so appreciate it that you're here. I know you're curious. I know you're relentless and tireless to help people find answers to the many problems that are plaguing chronic inflammatory problems that are plaguing people and the new things that are here just in the last few years. But you certainly are the picture of vitality, and it's just a joy to be with you. I first heard about you over 20 years ago from my mother-in-law. I just have to tell listeners, you know, I talk about my mother-in-law. She was hilarious. She was a wild child. She went to glory about a year ago, and my husband at her funeral said, Mom matured with grandchildren. And that was kind of the way that that he put it, because she's the most fantastic grandma. But she was a Dr. Dean advocate in this whole part of the country. She would stop strangers, Carolyn, and tell them about your book. And the big joke for everybody here was, no matter what the question is, magnesium is the answer. So,
Wow, that's fantastic.
Oh,
thanks, Mom.
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
If there's if this podcast is in heaven, she's on the front row seat and she's, you know, passing out, you know, your magnesium. But I so appreciate how you blend your broad range of clinical experience with evidence-based scientific research. Your book, I had read the first printing, and then you revamped it. There are over 500 scientific references in this book. I mean, that is a big deal, but you don't want just somebody who only, you know, looks at the studies. You want someone who's actually seen the patients. And I hope, Carolyn, you'll tell us some of those success stories today, because we need clarity on this critical yet unappreciated mineral that is rampantly deficient in our modern world. And we want to hear all those reasons. So how did you get interested in magnesium?
Okay, so I was working in Manhattan doing an AIDS and chronic fatigue trial. This was in the early 90s. And we were doing an alternative medicine study using homeopathic acupuncture, if you can believe it. So I guess I became known in the culture, was asked to do radio shows. I was on The View, for Pete's sakes, before they started doing the drug commercials. So you can imagine the backroom talks. Well, we can't have Dr. Dean on there saying the drugs aren't any good, so you have to fire her. So that's where, you know, direct to drug consumer ads began back in the early 90s. It was terrible. That ruined everything. So Random House, a friend who knew an editor at Random House, approached her about me writing a book on Chinese diet therapy. I was working with Chinese master, acupuncture and herbal therapy. And they said, oh, we just signed someone for that. But this editor had terrible migraines and she took magnesium and they helped. So she said to my friend, will Dr. Dean write a book on magnesium? So that was it. I mean, it was just so happenstance. So then, Debbie, I'm reading. Thank goodness I was online, so I could do online research. And I'm reading about my headaches, my neck tension, my heart palpitations, my Charlie horse leg cramps. I'm reading about my back pain, all the symptoms of magnesium deficiency. But I was still pushing myself, high adrenaline, high achiever, through this horror of all these symptoms. So I said, oh my gosh, I'm the poster child of magnesium deficiency. And then I go out and buy, lots of magnesium. And the moment I start taking it, I have the laxative effect. So I couldn't take enough to get rid of my symptoms. When the book was published, everybody, all of the mineral companies started using it to promote their sales of magnesium. And I went to all of them and I said, you've got to find a non-laxative magnesium, because magnesium, and I'll skip to what we now know in magnesium research, magnesium is responsible for 80% of known metabolic functions. 80%. And you can't even fathom what that means. And when you mention about the hundreds of enzymes, yes, if it's 80% of known metabolic functions, and as I think they say, I haven't found 100% reference, but they seem to say we have about 1,300 metabolic enzymes in our body, not digestive enzymes. These are metabolic enzymes that are driven by vitamins and minerals. If there's 1,300, 80% of that is 1,040 enzymes that are affected by magnesium. You take you can say to me any toxin, any disease, any part of the body, and I can find an enzyme that's driven by magnesium that has a responsibility in that function. And that's so huge. So if it is true that a certain percentage of people get the laxative effect when they take more than a couple hundred milligrams of magnesium, then all those people are kept from, creating the perfect cell processing, the perfect structure and function of their body. And what's more is their disease conditions, and I've got 68 listed, but all those conditions, if they're magnesium deficiency, they're being treated by drugs. And if then you look at the over 600 muscles in the body and the hundreds of miles of nerves, muscles and nerves are regulated by magnesium, which means if you have a muscle cell, that muscle cell will create its action by calcium being led into the cell by magnesium. Magnesium is the gatekeeper. It opens up the cell, boom, a little bit of calcium goes in, boom, the muscle fires. And then magnesium opens up the cell and pulls out the calcium. If you don't have magnesium, then the cell kind of remains open and calcium floods in and creates this twitching, this tingling, this burning, this muscle tension, this palpitation in your heart muscle and your nerves. So, you could say there are thousands of magnesium deficiency conditions if you add up all the nerves and muscles. So it's a tremendous thing. So, just to kind of complete the circle, I finally worked with a chemist who makes a stabilized picometer sized ion of magnesium from magnesium chloride. And this magnesium in a Pyrex vial, you cannot see particles when you put laser light through this Pyrex vial. We've done the studies in universities to prove this. So you've got an ion of magnesium that will just jump into a cell, do its job, and jumping into its cell, it makes me think right away of the Krebs cycle.
Mm.
The Krebs cycle and the glycolysis cycle that feeds pyruvate to the Krebs cycle, those cycles require magnesium. I mean, like in maybe a dozen steps. So if you don't have magnesium to jump from one step to the other, you don't get ATP, which is your energy molecule, adenosine triphosphate. The researchers say, well, really, ATP should be designated as ATP-MG,
Mm.
because
Right.
for every ATP or every ATP enzyme, you have to have magnesium. And that is huge, because what do people go to the doctor about? Oh, fatigue. I'm so tired. I can't get anything done. I'm not sleeping. I'm irritable. Oh, here's an antidepressant. Oh, and by the way, this Prozac antidepressant has iodine. No, what is it? Fluoride attached to
Oh,
it. I wish it was
yeah.
iodine.
Oh, I want to
It
go
has
down that trail.
fluoride. Well, ciprofloxacin is an antibiotic. And I bring it up when I talk about fluoride drugs. Um, they started attaching fluoride to all the popular drugs to make them more fat soluble, to get through our cell membranes. So the fluoride will be broken down out of those drugs in the GI tract by bacteria. The bacteria are doing all this wonderful stuff for the most part, and then that loose fluoride atom, fluorine atom, will attach to other molecules or atoms. It'll attach to magnesium, and it goes for magnesium because magnesium is so reactive. MgFL2 will then deposit in tendons and ligaments and joints. And there's even a black box FDA warning on Cipro saying that, oh, this drug can cause tendon rupture. And I'll tell you, I've talked to those people. These people are athletes. They're people who've been very active. They get an infection, they go to the doctor, they get Cipro, they don't rest, they go back into their athletic routine too quickly, and they rupture a tendon. It's that simple, and their lives are ruined. It's quite incredible. So the fluoride in our water, in our dental treatments. I mean,
Hmm.
I've walked out of dentist's office when they said, "Oh, so and so will come in and do your fluoride treatment." And I say, "You're still using fluoride? I don't want to be in this office."
Right. Right. No, it's almost a religion in dentistry, the whole
Mhm.
fluoride thing. It's crazy. And now we finally have great toothpaste options that don't have fluoride, that don't have sodium lauryl sulfate, that have better materials. But Carolyn,
Mhm.
I mean, I know you've experienced this with your medical colleagues. It's like nobody's, really wanting to do anything different than we did, in the 80s in dental school, or it's
Right.
just crazy. But when you in your book, you do such a beautiful job of talking about how fluoride is so interactive with magnesium that could really be at the base of so many health problems. I mean, that's just one of the ways that
Mhm.
the lack of magnesium is such a silent public health crisis that
Mhm.
everybody needs to address.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
thank you.
and that, yeah, oh, you're welcome. It was personal for me, and I think that's where a lot of good therapies come from. But it wasn't so personal that I just focused on that alone, because then I realized, oh, maybe we're not absorbing other minerals properly. So then I worked on creating a picometer size of other minerals. I look at a pico silver, for example, and you had a nice interaction with Dr. Thomas Levy in one of your podcasts, and he talked about the horrors of the mouth and the infections. Well, seriously, if you gargle with a bit of silver water every day, won't you help that situation? And for me, I had to get a root canal just a while back. So I took my Pico Magnesium and my Pico Silver and asked the dentist to use them. And at the end, he said, "Oh, looks like from the cone X-ray that we're too near a nerve. You're going to have a lot of pain." And I said, "I won't." And I went home and just kept gargling with the Pico Magnesium and Pico Silver, and it was fine. So we have resources and remedies. And when you make a blanket statement that all coronary artery disease is from dental infections, I mean that you cannot make these blanket statements. The only blanket statements I make, Debbie, is that everybody needs to take high doses of pico magnesium because then you're helping 80% of your body. And the reason I say that about, say, heart health is I also study something called total biology or German new medicine, and
Oh,
they talk
good.
about the conflict basis of disease. So you can have this setup of a dental infection, you can have nutritional deficiencies, you can have all the physical manifestations that could get you into a disease, into a hospital, let's say. But I think you really have to have a conflict to really kick it off. So what I tell people is, deal with your conflicts. If you've got some sort of gramophone thought, and I have to stop using the word gramophone because kids don't even know what a
I know
gramophone
what you
is.
mean. That's
So if you've got these revolving thoughts, negative, 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 oh, this is going to happen, that it will happen. You are calling it to yourself. So the quick story on German new medicine, total biology, is that Dr. Gert Hammer, he was a psychiatrist and an oncologist. His son was fatally wounded, gunshot wound by some royalty over in Europe. The doctor sat by his son's bedside for 3 months watching him die. And a few months after the son died, Gert developed testicular cancer and his wife developed ovarian cancer. They were trying to solve the problem, or their brain was trying to solve the problem. Oh, we need another son. We need an offspring to make up for what we just lost. The body operates on this level. A mother whose child is in intensive care, what can she do? Oh, the brain tells the milk ducts to make more milk to nurture the child, and that swelling in the milk ducts, when the child has survived and everything's great, the milk ducts, they have to recede, and then they become inflamed, and then that's diagnosed as breast cancer. So the conflict really has to be addressed. And I say that all the time. I've had patients and then telephone clients, and now I have customers. And my message has always been the same: take care of the physical as best you can, but then you do have to look at the conflict. And I'm not saying this is psychiatry. Psychiatry has as well, created such a drug culture that we don't even know we have a brain when we're taking the Prozac with fluoride, and we're being psychoanalyzed. And in the past, the electroshock therapy, it's just barbaric what's happened to psychiatry. So if we've got an ability to speak to someone, or even just write our own journal about what we're conflicted about, we really can be curing our problems and preventing our brain from having to intercede and give us a problem to try to find a solution. Oh, I've got such a pain in the neck. So who's a pain in the neck in your life? Oh, right. Okay, deal with that. Don't make it your body problem. Deal with conflict. So yeah, good sidebar.
No, great sidebar, Carolyn, because I've seen this in my clinical practice for almost 40 years. Someone will come in and have had some big trauma in their life. And then before you
Mm,
know it, they have some sort of cancer, or they have, some chronic problem,
mm-hmm,
emergency that
mm-hmm,
seems unrelated. So I just so appreciate you having this sidebar, because we are body, soul, and spirit, and we have to deal with all those parts. In the in the podcast before this one, I actually did a kind of a book report on the biology of belief, Bruce Lipton's
right,
book. Yeah,
right.
it really, really great.
Mm-hmm,
And I so believe it. I mean, we see it played out. We can't just, we can't exercise enough or eat enough healthy food or whatever to outdo a bad relationship. And
mm-hmm,
it's key. It's so key. It's
mm-hmm.
not just, one thing, which sort of leads me to I would love to hear your take on all of this new anxiety we are seeing in our world. I'm seeing teenagers who, are putting down that their big problems anxiety. And tell us how magnesium, especially in the form you have. I take the form that Carolyn has. You can we'll talk about how to find it on her website eventually. But tell us about how magnesium deficiency is related to anxiety.
It is, and there are layers to this as well. But let's look at the physical first. When you're stressed, you produce adrenaline and cortisol, and magnesium is involved in the pathways of making those and breaking them down. And magnesium is involved with the pituitary and pineal and how they exert pressure on the adrenal glands. It's the the pituitary, thyroid, adrenal axis, all that, they are so intertwined. So when we're under constant stress, and then we get hyper and jump at a loud sound and all the rest of it, we are burning our magnesium and we're not replacing it. So then we do get into a chronic magnesium deficiency cycle. Talked about the muscles and the nerves. If they're all tense and firing and tingling, we're reacting. We can't get a deep sleep. So all those things have the deficiency of magnesium from not being in the soil anymore. We're kicking it out of our foods. We're eating so much sugar that uses up a lot more magnesium in its metabolism. And then we have the stresses, and the stresses are being manufactured in a society that allows social media to educate our children. So they're on social media. I would like to get to the Maui fires at some point, because I do live in Maui,
I'd
and
love
it's just,
to hear your perspective.
yeah, yeah. So here in Maui, I go on the ocean walk down in front of the hotels here on the Kihei side, most mornings except for this morning. And what are people doing, Debbie? They're walking along, looking at their, black mirror, we call it. They're just into this mirror. They don't see nature. They don't see me smiling at them.
Right.
I'm doing the walk to collect smiles, and
Yes.
they're not even interacting.
Collecting
So,
smiles. Oh my gosh, I love that.
and then the kids, with their the TikTok and Twitters and whatever, and looking for likes, and they'll do something. A teenager, female mostly, they'll put something out and they'll get criticized because there are mean people out there. And then, they go into a funk. It's
Mhm.
just horrifying how this has been allowed to hypnotize, infect, and just horribly harm the mental health of our children. So
Ex-
there.
Exactly. And just relationships. I love to talk about relationships because it's all tied together. I Whenever during the ridiculous lockdown, we had a Pilates class. Our teacher actually is in her 70s, and oh my gosh, she's great. She can do push-ups. And so we had it outdoors at this park. Well, they had, oh, look at, if you guys could see, Dr. Dean is flexing her giant bicep. Oh my gosh. Well, if you're watching on video, you got to see it. You got to watch it on video if you're just hearing it on the podcast. So something to look forward to. It's amazing. And so there's a physician in our group, and I think Mike and I are the youngest, and we're 60, 64. And anyway, he tore off all this, yellow tape from the merry-go-round, and they had taped up all this playground equipment. So anyway,
Oh,
kids start coming to the playground. And what was so shocking to me, Carolyn, is that the parents who were there with their kids were on their phone. So,
uh,
one of my
right.
happiest, joyful memories is, being on the playground equipment with my children. And those days are short. And I just think, oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, those parents just, they're looking at something that's, probably fear invoking, and they could be hearing all the giggles and laughs and all that of their babies. It's just
Yeah, yeah,
inducing fear.
yeah.
So
Yeah, we've gotten hypnotized and misdirected, and then it does affect our health. It
mhm.
really does.
People are getting
Hmm.
sicker. So, what other, say, advancements in our modern world, and I say advancements with, sarcasm, in our modern world are depleting magnesium. Like,
Yeah,
tell
when
us
you
about
talk
that.
about our modern world, I think of one of my books. It's an ebook now, Death by Modern Medicine.
That's
And
good.
it is,
I haven't seen that.
so yes, it's death by modern everything. Okay, processed food. I mean, you think of, I mean, what is it? About 65% of an average diet is processed food. And what is in processed food? It's omega-6 fatty acids from so-called vegetable oils that aren't even vegetable oils, that are pro-inflammatory, which knock out our omega-3 oils that we need to make our cell membranes nice and tight. We're not getting our vitamins and minerals. I mean, you see in elderly people when they have bruising on their arms, that's scurvy. That's vitamin C deficiency scurvy. And that's what's going on inside there. Their gums are
Mhm.
bleeding.
Yeah.
No, it's not normal. You should not have bleeding gums. The rest of your internal environment, your coronary arteries, all your arteries are fragile and they're leaking. And what happens with leaking blood vessels is cholesterol will come along as a band aid
Hmm.
to help the situation. And the more bleeding you have, the more cholesterol you're making to help the situation. And then it's called the bad guy. And you press that down with statins, which are fluoride drugs as well, that cause so many side effects, including, you lose the fats for your brain, and your brain, they don't call us fatheads for nothing. Our brains are mostly fat. So we've got this horrible situation with the arteries being vitamin C deficient, and because what does vitamin C do? It makes collagen, and the collagen is what creates the um, the arteries and the veins. It's working on our tendons and our ligaments and our connective tissue. So vitamin C is vital, and I do believe in using whole seed vitamin C from foods as well as the ascorbic acids. The ascorbic acids may be more medicinal, but I still say we are in such need of antioxidants. Antioxidants, we have to use vitamin C as ascorbic acid, and it does not cause kidney stones. That's a big myth. Um, if you're healthy and have a balance of all your nutrients, your body can metabolize. What happens, Debbie, I see is when nutritional medicine, tried to be scientific, they would take one nutrient
Hmm.
and study it and ignore everything else. And that's not how the nutrients work. When somebody says, oh, well, you can't take vitamin D because it causes too much calcium buildup. No, you take vitamin D along with magnesium that helps activate it. If you take too much vitamin D without magnesium, then you're going to get magnesium deficiency and calcium buildup. Calcium and magnesium are kind of antagonistic cousins, and they need to be taken actually in balanced amounts. So let's sidebar into calcium. When the RDA says 1,200, 1,500 milligrams of calcium, they are causing you to die early. You are aging and calcifying with that much calcium, especially when you take like calcium carbonate type supplements that are only 4% absorbed. The rest of it is precipitating in your joints. Breast tissue calcification is now called a pre-cancer, DCIS breast disease. Uh, and it's a pre-cancer because it's just calcification, which can be undone when you solubilize your calcium in your soft tissues with magnesium. So what I recommend is 600 milligrams of calcium from your diet and a pico calcium. If you have to have calcium, you need a pico calcium. When I was playing with IV chelation years ago, because I try everything that I recommend.
Because you're so
So
curious, Carolyn. I love it. People
oh,
are going
I
to call you
know. I
Curious
mean,
Carolyn.
I'm so crazy. I would put the tourniquet on and I put the IV in my own arm. And after about 2 or 3 EDTA chelations, my knees started to ache. And I said, OMG, I am pulling out my calcium and who knows what else. So you've got the IV calc. What happens in alternative medicine? They'll have a good idea, but then they'll overdo it and be very medicalized about it. And when doctors got into vitamin D, they said, "Oh yeah, we really need to do that." And they started giving 50,000 units a day instead of 10,000, which is probably what we need. So the
Mhm.
50,000 units pulled out the magnesium. At that time I was on telephone consults and my clients were saying, "Oh my gosh, all my magnesium deficiency symptoms are back. What's going on? What are you taking?" And they had started taking vitamin D 50,000 units. So their calcium was being stripped away from, metabolic processes into metabolizing the vitamin D into active vitamin D. And the whole vitamin D business is difficult because they do measure storage vitamin D as your indication of how much vitamin D you have because active vitamin D is just so transient. So it's been very difficult. But I think if you follow the storage vitamin D and watch it rise, I mean, that I think is helpful. All the studies are showing that we do need levels of about 60.
Mhm.
I think it's nanograms for something, but
Per deciliter. Yeah.
I forget deciliter, good thing.
Mhm.
And when I first did my vitamin D test, just a couple of years ago, because I'm not big on testing, I just know we need all the nutrients. Let's take a little bit of everything, either in a picometer or food based, and we've got it covered. Seriously, I do believe that. So with my vitamin D test, I did an in-home finger prick spot test. You can do it through grassrootshealth.org. You can get RBC magnesium, the vitamin D, the omega 3s, and just the basic things. Just so my vitamin D, Debbie, was 19. 19.
That's
So
shocking.
here I was probably just, maybe I was just taking 1,000, who knows what I was taking, but I'm here. I try not to get too much sun. Um,
You were already
so
living
I
in
was,
Maui
and I'm
at that
living in
point?
Maui. Yeah. I've been here 15 years. So I didn't think I had vitamin D deficiency symptoms, but I knew from the literature I needed more. So I started to take 10,000 units, and I take one that I take my own, a D3K2. You have to have the K2 to push the calcium into the bones. Magnesium pushes calcium into the bones, K2 does as well. And in 3 months, I redid my finger prick test and I was 60, but my magnesium had gone down because I was using up my magnesium to
Mhm.
metabolize my vitamin D. So there was my proof. You're always doing experiments, either,
Exactly.
just day-to-day observation, or you'll do a test here and there. So then with omega 3s, I mentioned that, when we're with this processed food that's killing our brains and everything, we're not getting enough omega 3. What I've done there is I put omega 3 with vitamin A and vitamin E, all the fat soluble nutrients together. And I'm getting back around to part of the story where vitamin D requires vitamin A in its metabolism as well. So that's why I threw in the vitamin A uh, and made it in a fat soluble container, because what did they say about even omega 3s and vitamin A and vitamin E? Oh, you have to eat them with a fatty meal. And it's like, oh my gosh, all these restrictions, you
Mhm.
know, well, I don't eat fat in my diet, or when am I putting restrictions on people, telling people to stop this and stop that? When you go to a doctor and you'll go to an alternative medicine doctor and they say, well, your thyroid is needs help and your adrenals need help, but we can't do them both together because they're kind of antagonistic. We'll treat one and then the other. That's crazy talk. Your cells, you're made of cells, and all your cells require the same nutrients. So support all your cells and let the body do the rest. I mean, when it comes to thyroid, do any of the endocrinologists know that there are 9 minerals that are responsible for making thyroid hormone? 9 minerals. It's not just iodine. It's not just iodine and selenium. We've got boron and chromium and molybdenum and magnesium as well. We've got all these minerals, and when you take pico multiple minerals, within a few months, you no longer need your armor thyroid, case in point, because
So
your body is
cool.
able to make them. Otherwise, what are we doing? We're waiting until our thyroids are dead, and then we're doing replacement therapy.
Mhm.
It's either a drug, or if you go to an alternative medicine practitioner, it's still a drug, and it's still waiting until your thyroid is dead, even though they say, oh, it's a desiccated, it's this, it's that. But if you can take your nutrients, then you're supporting your own thyroid. Anyway, there are so many sidebars.
Oh, awesome sidebars. I love these little road trips. But that's the thing in my research about your form of magnesium, which I take now, is that people do not need a healthy gut in order for it to work correctly. Now, I have a
Mhm.
healthy gut, but the patients I see um, generally come to me because they don't have a healthy gut. So people who don't have a healthy gut need a, uh ionic form of these minerals, correct?
Mhm. Yes, that's right, and that's the beauty of using this picometer ionic stabilized ion, because in your mouth it's absorbing. In your
Mm-hmm.
esophagus,
Mm-hmm.
people will have they'll choke, they can't swallow pills. How many people have you heard say that?
Oh.
Oh, yeah, I can't swallow pills. They make me. Well, that's their esophageal muscles going in spasm. So yes, when you get the leaky gut, that's another thing I've heard um, practitioners say. Well, there's no point giving you new supplements until we detox you and fix your microbiome. And they have all this list. Oh, but first let's do $3,000 worth of tests
Hmm.
to just confirm everything that common sense tells us so that I can make my 50% commission. It's so
Yeah.
sad. But I mean, alternative medicine is very difficult. When I was doing the AIDS and chronic fatigue work in New York, we were working in our lab, but also at a clinic. And the doctor told me that her overhead was 80% from her, from the staff and the rental and location, everything. She said, I have to sell supplements and I have to sell high end supplements in order to keep my doors open.
Oh, good
So you will
goodness.
be, yeah, you'll be pulled into that. I mean, when doctors find out how well my supplements work, their office managers get scared because their patients stop buying the expensive supplements
No, it's so
because they don't
logical.
need them anymore. Yeah.
Well, and I don't
So,
think people need to trade a handful of pharmaceuticals for a handful of supplements. I always tell my patients
no,
that we're not going to just put you on more
mhm,
pills. We're going to help your body get well. There's a few things you're going to need that, environmentally we don't get anymore. And magnesium is one of those things. Give us your perspective on all of the food testing that
mhm.
is going on these days.
Well, that wraps into leaky gut as well, Debbie. So we've got a leaky gut that's, I think, caused by yeast overgrowth. I mean, that's another big topic I
Mm-hmm.
have.
Yeah.
My two major roads to chronic fatigue are magnesium deficiency and other mineral deficiencies and yeast overgrowth. So you've got a situation where even if you take 10, 10 days, 2 weeks of antibiotics, you've killed all your good bacteria and you have to get them back. And it's difficult to get them back. But also you've got fluoride and chlorine that will um, kill intestinal flora. Mercury in the teeth,
Mm-hmm.
you're chewing and grinding, you're swallowing mercury, that will kill intestinal bacteria. You've got the zonulin that we're talking about now that certain gut bacteria make, but also yeast can make. And the zonulin kind of acts like a
Yeah. Opens.
anti-glue uh, that, your cells are glued together and the zonulin, well, let's open
Mhm.
that up.
Yeah.
So you've got a super highway of undigested food molecules that leap into your bloodstream and then cause your body to freak out because they're foreign bodies. So you get this antigen antibody reaction. The antigen is a foreign body. Antibodies have to get rid of it. That's your body's immune system at work. But lo and behold, I mean, I've been working with yeast since I started practice in 1979. In 1986, Dr. William Crook came up to Canada, and I was on a TV show with him. 1986, 90-minute TV show, a call-in show. We had 80,000 people call in. They were
And
just so mesmerized by this yeast overgrowth business. So anyway, what's happened lately with leaky gut and the microbiome and everything, they are ignoring yeast. They are putting it on the shelf. It's all about the bacteria, the bacterial flora, and oh yeah, lactobacillus acidophilus, and that's the one we need. The ones they're studying are the ones they're finding in the stool that kind of are food for the better bacteria. So they're studying the waste product, and it wasn't until they started doing um, gastro intestinal biopsies, putting a tube down to the small intestine and finding out what's really going on in the gut, and it's soil-based bacteria. You cannot take a probiotic that just has, 6, 10, 12 different species. Oh yeah, we got all these species. Seriously, how many thousands of species are there? You have to get them from the soil, from, but anyway, that total other sidebar. So since knowing about yeast overgrowth in my naturopathic studies after med school, and working with actually the Candida Foundation up in Canada, um, I had people on very strict diets. I did antibody testing, I did questionnaires. The antibody testing you could not rely on because everybody's got some yeast. It's a natural
Mhm.
organism that's built in. It's like mold and fungus in the woods that breaks down dead and dying material. So we have our own dead and dying material breakdown with yeast. But what we've done is, by using antibiotics and all the other things I mentioned, birth control pill, cortisone,
Mm.
we have created an environment that kills off good bacteria and leaves room for yeast to expand. So yeast will expand up from the large intestine into the small intestine,
Mm.
cause a leaky gut. 78 different yeast toxins will be absorbed through the leaky gut open pathway, and they are causing autoimmune disease. The first big autoimmune disease that Dr. Ari Vojdani, he set up my lab up in Canada when I was doing yeast antibody testing and food allergy testing. And he found cross reactivity with yeast toxins with the thyroid, and he found cross reactivity with all kinds of organs. So cross reactivity means when the immune system goes after the yeast toxin, it will also attack the tissue on which this toxin is either attached or mimicking. I have never seen so many autoimmune diseases. When I was in medical school in the mid 70s, what was there? Rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and even those we know are related to glutens and
And
maybe
leaky
meal
gut,
proteins
yeah, small
and leaky
intestinal
gut.
fungal
Yeah.
overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Well, yeah, in the 80s, I mean, I graduated in 85, and autoimmune disease is like 3 lines, in
Yeah.
epidemiology
Hmm.
class. It's just not much at all. Now, I'm seeing it all the time, which is a great segue, Carolyn, into telling us what advice you would have for people who have had the COVID vaccine, who've actually have had COVID. All that's impacting people. We're finding out so much now in the clinical patients I'm seeing. It is big. So, what is your recommendation?
Right. As soon as COVID, so-called COVID hit, the COVID non-epidemic, and not to, I mean, it's like, we're saying that what people suffered didn't happen, but what happened was, with a virus that was probably genetically engineered, we really wouldn't know how difficult it was going to be. But what we did know about viruses is the body's immune system will help get rid of viruses. What I knew about vaccines was create, what is it? Ooh, an institute that does meta-analysis, the Cochrane Institute. And a few years ago, they put out a study saying that they analyzed all the studies they could find on flu vaccine effectiveness. And not that many studies, actually. I don't know if it was 35. They said it had a 1% to 2% effectiveness, flu vaccines. So I said, okay, well, that's not going to help. And then in terms of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, they work as ionophores to allow zinc into the cells, and zinc is the antiviral. These drugs are not the antiviral. Nobody's talking about that. So with Pico Zinc, then a person can be working on that antiviral level. And I'm hearing now Dr. Corey is talking about using ivermectin in long COVID. And I'm not treating long COVID in any way, but I do say that the new face of magnesium deficiency is long COVID. And I'm not hearing people talk about magnesium in long COVID. I've been treating chronic fatigue syndrome, which is long COVID, since the early 80s. And it's a magnesium and mineral deficiency and yeast overgrowth. What has happened to the people who've been treated for COVID? They've been put on massive amounts of drugs, cortisones and antibiotics and everything. They've got yeast overgrowth, and they're suffering those effects. So hair loss. I had COVID a few times, and my hair, I think I started thinning. But
It
so,
looks
I
thick.
mean, it looks thick. Hair products, Debbie, hair products.
You're darling. You are absolutely darling. Well, and this reminds me, Carolyn, of Mama Mary, my mother-in-law, again, because she had been a smoker for probably, I'm going to guess, 30 plus years when she discovered you. She was very much overweight. She was a hardworking person. So she, just didn't do a lot of self-care. But when she discovered you, her whole life changed. Her whole life changed. She had previously had polyps with her colonoscopies. Everything cleared up. She sort of undid just this whole ball of yarn of problems, from her, say, her lifestyle choices before 50. And then after that, she was using everything you recommended, and then telling strangers in the grocery store that they needed to be using it too. And I mean, she would just stop people. And it was so great because she was vibrant. She lived to 89, and she was active. She was mentally fit. She was serving people. She was an incredible grandmother, mother-in-law, parent, just an amazing woman. But literally, I can say that magnesium was her turning point. And really we think she would still be alive if it weren't for the lockdowns and just loneliness, just her, she had just recently moved to an active living center, but there she was locked in, and even we were locked out. So that's really when rapid decline started. But when as you describe chronic fatigue syndrome, that's probably what she had at 50 before she started the unravel. I'm guessing.
And that's a beautiful story about how starting with magnesium, it can unravel so many things. And, what in terms of even magnesium and the microbiome, what we find with our customers is after a couple of months, if they're just using magnesium, they'll say, oh, I've got this skin rash and my tongue is coated and I've got more gas, and women, I'll get some vaginitis. What's going on? I thought it was cured. And we say, oh, this is great. Your immune system has kicked in. You're ready to get rid of your yeast. Seriously, just taking magnesium elevated their immune system enough that they were ready. Their body decided, okay, let's go to the next priority. You may think you're taking magnesium for insomnia. That's the main thing they talk about. That's the only thing you can advertise now, because the FDA won't let me say that my particular product can help anybody. I just have to talk generically. But people just think it'll help me sleep. Whereas most doctors, they just think of it as a laxative. So,
Those
when
people.
people get the diarrhea or whatever, they say, oh, well, then you've had enough. And it's so criminal because we haven't been taught about the 80% of no metabolic functions. It's
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah. No, it's phenomenal. And just to think back, everything you said, oh my gosh, she was having body aches, those went away. I think it sort of gave her energy to do
Hmm.
other things when she started sleeping better, when she, started having more mental clarity. Really spectacular, absolutely spectacular. And I don't know in those days, Carolyn, if you actually had your ionic form. I don't know how
No,
long.
that was in 2014, I think. So just 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. No, amazing.
20.
Amazing.
Yeah.
She would watch you on different TV shows, and she came to our house every Tuesday night and cooked for us and, spent the night and stuff. And so she would have her notes. And so she would sit at dinner and tell us everything you'd said. And it was just great. It's just such
That
a
is
sweet time,
beautiful.
such sweet
Yeah,
memories.
that's beautiful.
Well,
Well, the curiosity, her curiosity, she found out something, and people will do that. They're, what is it, early adapters?
right.
She was an early adapter on that and just went for it. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really, we've talked about, Mike and I've talked about, you probably gave her an extra 20 years. And
Mm.
in fact, we went to Hawaii a couple of times and took her, and she did a kayak trip, and everybody thought she couldn't, we climbed a mountain after that, and she was just, trudging up there. Pretty incredible. Well,
Yeah.
circle back to some of those medications that deplete magnesium. I think our listeners really need to hear that.
Right,
It's pretty
right.
shocking.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a slideshow on it. I'll try to remember some. One of the craziest ones is Flonase. It's a nasal
Hmm.
spray.
Yes.
I think the steroid nasal spray. It has
Yes.
fluoride in it. You're squirting it right into your brain, and the Prozac, and I think Paxil as well. I
Hmm.
mean, what people could do is whatever drugs they're on, just Google it for
Right.
the chemical composition, and you'll see the F there. Now, the scariest ones, I think, are the general anesthetics that are given to you during surgery. You have this
Hmm.
mask on, you're breathing an anesthetic, and several of them have fluoride. And what do we know about post-surgery? Post-surgery atrial fibrillation. So what's happening? Uh, the fluoride is binding with the magnesium,
Hmm.
and you're getting an electrical imbalance in your heart because you don't have the magnesium, and it's causing AFib. And then you're diagnosed with AFib for the rest of your life on a blood thinner and a
Yeah.
few drugs.
Yeah.
And some of those AFib drugs have fluoride in them.
Well, and they also deplete all kinds of other essential nutrients. I mean, I have my patients just kind of read about what nutrient depletions there are with their med list, or I give them, a list of, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very motivating for them because they're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I see why I need to work my way toward getting off of this.
Right, right, because there's an they're not benign, and
Mm.
what patients of doctors think is their doctor has their best, whatever, the best in mind for them. But doctors are just going by what the drug reps say and by the most commonly used drugs. And doctors will deny drug side effects. I mean, if you come to a doctor, they don't want to think that they're causing you a side effect. Often they'll say, well, you just need to take more. They will go, the opposite way. Well, you're not taking enough. And I can't remember where I even saw this study, but it was some small percentage of doctors will even recognize a drug side effect. And it's got to do with their ego. They've never learned about nutritional medicine. So if you say, well, magnesium really helps my heart, they'll tell you to get out of the office. Cardiologists have told my clients and customers that AFib is lifelong and they have to be on these drugs forever. And they will not acknowledge a patient who says, well, actually, magnesium helped me. So then that scares the patient. Then they've got a toxic diagnosis. They've got this negative thought form now in their head that starts growing like a fungus, and they can't get it out of their head. And as a dietary supplement manufacturer, I can't say to them, well, maybe you just have magnesium deficiency and you don't have AFib. And people will get the ablations, which is, like a hot poker in your heart, to actually scar the area that causes the heartbeat, that they say is fibrillating, and they expect another part of the heartbeat chain to take over. I mean, it's just so barbaric, because they could be looking at nutrients in biochemistry in medical school. The dean of medicine was a biochemist, so he got his 200 hours in there. And up in the chain of reactions, like I said, for Krebs cycle or whatever, we could see the magnesium. I went into med school knowing about Prevention Magazine and
Yeah, me
Pavarola
too.
and
Me too.
Adele Davis. They were
Yes.
the only people around back then. And it was there for everybody to see, but nobody brought it into clinical. The doctors who did the forward for my Magnesium Miracle book, Burton and Bella Altura,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah. They sound awesome.
famous magnesium, yeah, famous magnesium researchers. And at that time, they've already written 1,000 papers on magnesium. And I was bouncing around saying, yeah, I think I'll ask the Alturas to write a forward for my book. Oh, they'll never talk to you. They're bench chemists, and they don't get into clinical. They don't get into clinical. What are they doing all this research for? So when I approached them, they said, we're fed up with the fact that we do all this research and it's not applied clinically. We will be happy to do a forward.
Oh,
So, I
Carolyn.
mean, but still,
Right.
we don't have enough doctors who know about this.
Well, it has to be what started this podcast 100 and whatever 17 episodes ago was trying to help people be their own advocates for their health, because I just think that's what it comes down to. And it's, never, that's 2 years ago. Or people have to get educated, use the brain God gave them, and figure things out. What I do in my clinic is I'll find out whatever, then I give patients research out of the journals that, whatever doctors they're going to.
Mm-hmm.
When they see that research is right there, I just tell them their doctors don't have time to read it. You have to read it for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I was doing well, maybe it was 210, something like 2010. I decided to do an online wellness program, and I think it was like 101 modules. Every week, people would get 8-10 pages of do this, about electricity,
Wow.
about diet, about this, about that. It was all the lifestyle thing. And I said, oh, you'll learn so much. This is all you need. By 2008, when the crash happened, people started to say to me, I don't have time to read anything. Just tell me what to do.
Right.
And when I went to look at, well, what should they do? I was really kind of freaked out at the dietary supplement industry, because herbs weren't regulated. You could import herbs from China, and if they came contaminated with bugs or chemicals or heavy metals, they could be cleaned up in
Mm-hmm.
in the manufacturing place. They spray them with nitrous oxide, whatever they did, but none of that was on the label of the herb. They just said it's clean, no organisms, this much heavy metal, not too much. And then it would pass. And
Yeah.
you wouldn't even know, well, were they floor scrapings or were they actually
Right.
flowers of the herb? You have no
Right.
idea. So, I was training with a Chinese herbal medicine doctor. I had done my naturopathic herbology, and I said I can't recommend herbs because we don't. Are they wildcrafted? Are they organic? Can you trust anything? Anytime a herb sort of gets big press, people will throw it out on the marketplace, and you have no idea where it's coming from. And then, to find out that I needed the magnesium myself. That's how I never thought I'd have a dietary supplement company. Heaven forbid, that was like, oh my gosh, you can't get involved in that. It's a conflict of interest. But who's going to create a product that works except someone whose life depended on it? So it was pretty interesting how that all happened.
No, it's fascinating. And it usually does start out of, seeing a real problem, usually a personal problem. And then someone like you
Yeah.
who really cares about people. I mean, obviously, Carolyn, you care to go to medical school and naturopathic school. And then you've continued to get educated in a jillion different ways. Well, I want you to tell people in your own words how they can find you and how they can tap in, like we have, to your uh, quality products that really work. I think people waste way too much money on supplements and rely on supplements. I mean, there's a lot of magnesium rich foods that could be eating too, of course. And I always love to talk about that. So actually tell us about magnesium rich foods and tell us how they can find you. And this is a supplement people need for my listeners. My listeners know I don't recommend a bunch of supplements. But magnesium
Mhm.
is one of the basics that we all need.
Right. I'm afraid of the foods not having enough magnesium. As soon as I got to Maui, I found a farmer that I could work with, and organic biodynamic. And I tried various times just to eat the farm produce, and you cannot get enough magnesium
Mm.
even from organic biodynamic. Dynamic. So there's the farm, but I'm also here on Maui, and what I'm doing with the farm now is we're driving truckloads of fresh produce to the good people of Maui who've been displaced with this
Mm.
disastrous fire. You have no idea, Debbie. It's
I
a
can't
small
fathom it.
island, 150,000 people. Everybody knows everybody. You cannot walk down the street without, the first thing, are you okay? Do you have people who need help? And then you hug people. I have
Yeah.
never hugged so much in my life.
Yeah.
And then you clean out everything in your home that even if you need it, you just take it to the depot site. You give money. I have a charitable foundation to support the farm itself, parageniusfoundation.org, and I'm taking all the donation money to parageniusfoundation.org and using it with the farmer to keep giving truckloads of food because these people are not eating. They don't have anything. They have burnt out of their life savings and memories and
Yeah.
everything. And it's only us humans that are helping. We don't see much other help. We see a lot of fighting between the different factions of who's in charge of this. No, us humans are in charge of it. So, from magnesium, no, you don't get enough. We're helping the fire relief. Take action. That's what I say. So what we've been talking about here, take action on your health. What have you heard? Oh, magnesium is good. Oh, look, in my whatever drug cabinet, I actually have a magnesium. Maybe I should start taking it. And if you take it and you feel better, awesome. If you take it and you get the laxative effect, then you can look at my picometer magnesium. And that site is rnareset.com. And I had that trademark, that website, RNA Reset, long before you know what
That is
happened.
hilarious. That is
Yes,
so hilarious.
we have to get our RNA back in order.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that was
then,
just a divine gift, I think, there.
right.
I
And then the
also,
education.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just the third website, Debbie, sorry to interrupt, but it's drcarolyndean.com. That's my educational website, because I'm not allowed to say good things about anything on my
Sure.
RNA Reset website. So drcarolyndean.com, you can click to my radio show. I have a weekly radio call-in radio show, and tons of articles and webinars and everything. But you don't have, I have a membership side of it too, so I can be less discreet, because the FDA is determined to not let us have access to dietary supplements because they interfere too much with vaccines and drugs.
Well,
So,
you have a robust Instagram too. So check that out, folks. It's really good. And I'll put all of these in the show notes, Carolyn. I want to put your charity in there. If anybody, wants to
oh,
donate,
thank
right,
you.
they could do that. That would be wonderful.
Yes.
Oh, this has just been a joy. And I don't know, I mean, we can, I hate to ask you on camera, but sometime I want you to come back and talk about
Uh,
hormones. This is a really great book,
oh,
folks, Hormone Balance, because it ties
right.
into this, as you talked about with thyroid. I mean, everything affects everything. Our body, like the original Dr. Mayo said years ago, a sick man is not a wagon to be taken apart and repaired in pieces. He must be looked at as a
Right.
whole. So that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully, this has just helped you all. I know it's helped all the listeners. You're so inspiring. And so, is it right to ask you how old you are? I mean, you're just
Yeah,
gorgeous.
I guess so. My husband says I should.
You
He seems to
should.
think it. I'm 74.
Ah, you're incredible. I mean, this is what,
I, I drink sea salt water, Debbie.
you do.
Sea salt in my water. Hydration is very important. We didn't even get to that. There's so much.
Oh, there's so
It's
much. Well,
in
save
there.
that. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that with hormones, because that's a big deal. So sea
Okay.
salt water, and it's just been fantastic. You've been one of my icons, and it's so funny when I contacted you, I was like, oh, will she say yes? I don't know. You were so gracious, and thank you for that, and thank you, listeners, for joining in. We are now in 102 countries, and I think over 2,600 cities. And that's because of
Really?
it's because of the listeners just being so gracious to share it
Mhm.
and to subscribe. I'm newly on Instagram, just May 11th, and having a great time there. So check me out on Instagram. Check out Dr. Dean on Instagram. I'll have all of her websites in the show notes. And thank you for listening. Blessings until next time.